Thank you for joining us today and welcome to this session on what's working, sharing experiences of generative AI. My name is Hassan Pastravi. I'm an associate professor in data science here at UQ and really delighted to be joining you here today for this session. Can I start by acknowledging our country and UQ acknowledging the traditional owners and their custodians of the land in which we meet, and we pay our respect to ancestors, descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connection to country. Okay, so today's session is about generative AI. So I thought I'll have a few slides to put things into perspective, though there are many experts already in the audience, but then I'm gonna pass it over to our presenters today to talk about what's working in their classes. Generative AI is a subset of AI that uses machine learning and different techniques. And really what's important about it is you give it an input and it's designed to create new content, which could be text, image, music, or many other forms of artifacts. It's a very fast moving field. And every other day you'll find a new few generative AI applications being added to a landscape. This is an image of a fairly recent one from the landscape of the applications. Many of the applications work on some form of text. So they use large language models where the output is text. There's some that work on videos, images, code interpreters, speech, and so on and so forth. And there'll be many other types of applications that are also being added to this landscape. The main two ones, though, that I'll quickly mention is use of AI art generation, which essentially focuses on generating images based on text prompts or an image. And we've been getting these absolutely beautiful images that are being generated by AI. And the way that usually this works is that there's a prompt. For example, for this image here, the prompt is dripping red paint across the shape of a female human, realistic, high details on a white background. And away it goes where AI is at work in order to create these types of images. The other main one that's being used is use of large language models, and ChatGPT in particular has been probably the most popular. It's an intelligent chatbot created by OpenAI that uses large language models in an interactive conversational way. Currently, they offer a free and as well as a subscription plan. If you haven't created an account, you haven't played around with them, I do strongly encourage you to create a free account and have a play around with it. I've used this image a few times, but that's kind of my sense of what's ChatGPT and what these large language model chatbots look like. And the prompt is friendly and happy chatbot sitting in a nice place working with computer and having it look highly detailed. There's many common applications that have been looked at: writing essays, lesson plans, designing class syllabus. And if you want to have a look at those, have a look at Tori Trust's work. And there are examples of how each of these could work. Here at UQ, we've been adding generative AI to our own application with Ripple, where it has three main interactive learning activities of creating content, where we're using AI assistants to help students with creating content such as multiple choice questions or worked examples, moderation, where we facilitate peer evaluation. And again, here we use AI to assist students in providing good feedback and personalized practice in terms of giving students an unique study plan for each of them to go through it based on their own needs. If you're interested in having a look at Ripple, do contact us at ripple@uq.edu.au. And finally, before I pass it on, some general opportunities and challenges that have been emerging from use of generative AI in education. There's been a high level of interest among educators in terms of how we can use it. There are good applications in terms of how it can provision real-time feedback and personalization. It can boost educator productivity. It can enhance student support mechanisms. And it's a good way to get students to develop AI literacy and add it to the curriculum. It has also been mentioned that it comes with significant challenges still. There's a need to rethink assessment, as much of what we currently assess or used to assess it until 2022 can now be done by these generative AI systems. It has an unpredictable nature in terms of the output that you can get. They're prone to inaccuracies and biases. They're hard to integrate into ecosystems. So the common use case is kind of just using the chat as a conversation, but actually bringing it into applications is challenging. And there's very limited efficacy studies on student learning and how it actually impacts that. All right, so with that, I would like to pass it on to our presenters today. And for each of them, we'll have a presentation and then we'll have some time for questions after that. We do have share your own experience Padlet, and Karen, if you can add that link to the chat, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you have also been using generative AI in your own teaching or work, we would love to hear from you. Put your thoughts into the Padlet, and we would very much like to invite you for our future sessions in what's working with generative AI. Jack, can I hand it over to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Is my slide in your slide deck? It is wonderful. I like you've given me 6 minutes. It's very precise. I like the precision there. However, my name is Jack Wang. I'm from School of Chemistry and Molecular Biosciences, and I'm a microbiologist, and my case study here is really around laboratory reports. We've all seen the Atlantic article, "The essay is dead," with the looming AI threat. My question was, is the lab report dead as well? And the lab report being one of the most common progressive assessment tasks that we do in science education outside of things like the final exam. So it begs the question, is this written medium also dead with the advent of GenAI? And basically, my thought process was, can we reverse engineer a series of prompts that students may use to do different parts of this assessment task? And they range in complexity from, can you do this assignment for me? Just paste the entire instruction set for the assignment into some kind of chat bot and get a meaningful response, all the way to this very specific part of the science report. Can you replicate this part of it for me? And the versions of GenAI out there all can do this to some extent. As we all probably have figured out by now, those big umbrella catch-all prompts, can you just do this thing for me, don't really work out very well. But I suspect that's where a lot of students, given the headlines, would start. Can you do this assignment for me, and just expect the response to be good. In science, it's pretty good, as you might imagine, at the earlier preamble opening statements for scientific studies to give some very broad literature review and some basic concepts in the field. But if you actually want to dive into the specificities of a research project in science, you need to give it a lot more detail on exactly what's happening in this research project. And it turns out, using the current tools anyway, using the text-based prompts, you need at least 4 or 5 prompts with very specific details for the output to be meaningful in some way. Not to say it won't pass an assessment grade, and that's the challenge. What type of prompting is going to be enough to solicit a passing grade from an assessor, or to the point where an assessor can't distinguish between something that's meaningfully done by a student that can pass versus something that was generated through AI? And so right now, for the different sections of our lab report in science, the opening sections, the introductions, you can probably pass that reasonably well. So then the onus is on us to re-emphasize the assessment weighting, or maybe to de-emphasize that in our assessment design overall. Where it really gets stuck currently is in the data visualization side of things, given that, as Hassan highlighted, is primarily text-based prompting currently. So to really get numerical data into a chatbot and get a graphical output that requires tweaking often, it's not great at it, and it often stumbles and it misinterprets numerical data, again, unless it has all of these additional prompts. But if the students know what to prompt exactly to get exactly the right formatting of data, well, they already know kind of everything there is to know about that data, and maybe we're assessing the wrong thing if we're focusing on that mechanical part of data formulation as opposed to the analytical side. You can get it to spit out Python code, and you can then put that into a different program to make a graph. But right now, straight from text to data visualization seems to be an awkward fit using the most common freely available tools. So a few closing thoughts from me. I know I'm running out of time. First of all, I've already mentioned it, we do need to adjust the assessment weighting to emphasize the bits that AI maybe doesn't do quite as well as reframe the parts that it does do well. So for instance, the introduction section of a lab report can be done relatively okay by AI. It's filled with false references, irrespective of the type of GPT you're using. It still hallucinates on occasion. But maybe a reframing of that could be, communicating the science to an audience that's in the general public, and maybe co-opting AI to do that alongside the student to make that more effective means of disseminating very complicated data. But the other piece of this is that all the people who are in the room on the Zoom today, I mean, you're already thinking about this. You've already hopefully had some plans in place, but I'm not actually worried about any of the people who are here. It's the people who are not paying attention, the people who are first-time teachers, and I speak to and work with a lot of them. They just don't have the bandwidth to really think about this in any meaningful way. And that's why it's really important for us to disseminate our experiences within our disciplines as well as without. And so the link there is my attempt at doing this. This is my publication in Microbiology Australia, which is actually like a general interest microbiology magazine, as opposed to something that's very, very scholarly and targeted at researchers. That was my attempt to try and get the word out about how AI is impacting my field, which is specifically microbiology education. Hopefully I haven't ran over time, Hassan. I'm happy to stay on to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Fascinating stuff. Any questions for Jack?
Maybe more of a comment. I don't know if you guys have seen yet. Code Interpreter has been integrated with GPT. So we're now able to upload CSV files with, say, the assignment data and use natural language to talk to GPT, to ask it to give us beautiful visualizations, to analyze in all kinds of ways immediately for us, to describe the data, to present tables, everything that we thought was safe in the realm of stats. Now GPT actually has that capacity to do that as well, which is like amazing and terrifying.
Oh, great. Thanks. And it's paid version and fun, as Dom's comment. Wonderful. So again, I'm on the same time a little intimidated by it, but at the same time, if the students know enough about how to use that tool, then maybe we're focusing on the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would love it for them to have very sophisticated analysis off the boot, but I'm stuck in the mud trying to get them to understand the basic mechanics of analysis, right? So it's that reframing, but I just think the timeline for reframing is really warped depending on the discipline you're in. Yeah.
Jack, I was wondering, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, you talked about the people that you were trying to assist, and you said that they haven't got either the time or the bandwidth. How do we reach those people, do you think? I mean, apart from, down through the school and the faculties, yes. What will it take to give them enough time to get those kinds of things under control?
Yeah, I mean, you already know the answer to this question, Karen, is that we don't really have a concrete answer to this. So my experience is that people pay attention to education topics when it's very clearly in their discipline. Well, that's the first thing that raises the radar, right? Like that triggers some thought. So if it's a general education topic, maybe people within the disciplines don't think it's immediately relevant to them, even if it's not. That's why I'm working to talk to the people in my immediate field to really try and raise the relevancy to them. But a place like Italy, I think you could find academic champions of different disciplines to find very specific use cases for AI in their discipline. And that probably will have a better effect in the first instance of raising people's radar to say, oh, hey, it's in my field. I'm in danger too. I should have a look. Yeah.
I might just add to the comment from Ryan and Dom put into the chat. So the code interpreter is fairly new. I think it's been around for some time, but now it's actually being given out more based on the paid version. And that last point you got there, can adjust assessment weightings to emphasize just current weaknesses. That weakness is now dead. So essentially, you can almost give it your scientific lab reporting as is with the data, and it will be providing a really good answer, and the visualization and the code and the analysis. Yeah, if people know how to use it, I mean, if the prompt is just becoming enter, what the lab report question is, then that's scary, because that's not good enough for them to actually know what's happening underneath. But very recent additions, and be interesting to see, how this will evolve in the new semester if you're still using this, and have some sort of comparison between before this code interpreter and in the presence of the code interpreter to see how student responses have changed.
for sure. There's a question in the chat from Dom. Hassan, if I have time to respond to it, well, I
Please,
might
yeah,
have
go
time.
ahead. No, go
So
ahead.
Dom, so this is the communication side of it. How do we talk about this without making it seem scary? I'm not really sure, Dom. But I will say what has worked for me in some instances is to place the autonomy in the hands of the teacher to say, we have the capacity to shape the assessment, and we have at least an incentive, a very clear incentive to do so. I know a lot of teachers don't feel like they've got that much control over their classrooms, certainly in the last few years. And the motive to change has not been on their behalf. It's been done to them rather than they're doing the change. So finding a way of reshaping your classroom and doing so in a way that's authentic to you, that's a good conversation starter, of course, but how that actually looks will vary depending on the teacher. But yeah, giving teachers the illusion of more control in the short term is appetizing, but whether that's true or not, we'll see.
Jack, one last one from me before we move on. Have you had a chat with the students about this? Is what comes to student from all this?
Students obviously are going to be using this because all we do is talk about it. So obviously they're going to see all the headlines that we do and hear all the fuss that we're making about it and going to gravitate towards it. And they're going to use it in whatever is the lowest common denominator, right? They're going to find ways of improving their workflow, like many of us are trying to use it to improve our workflow as well. And I think not having a conversation openly is the danger rather than choosing for transparency. And so my example here is, I'm going to have a section of this specific assignment where it's communicate the findings to the general public. Here is the AI's response. Try and improve it however way you can, and write me a reflective piece on what you've done to improve this response to engage different types of audiences. I think including it in some assessment, not all assessment, is the way forward. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, fantastic. Let's move on. Ryan, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I've been spending some time redesigning a course called The Science of Everyday Thinking over in the School of Psychology. Some of you might also know it as the popular MOOC on edX. So what I've been doing with that one is actually getting back to first principles to begin with, to think about what we actually want our students to take away from the course and be able to do with it. So for background, the course is about unpacking how we form judgments and decisions just on a daily kind of basis, how we rely on different heuristics and biases to actually perceive the world in the first place, and ultimately then how we form beliefs and how we might form dubious beliefs. And we want our students to have a deep understanding of how those processes are happening, but then ultimately be able to use that knowledge to kind of effect positive change in the world and actually go into areas where decision-making might be less than optimal and be able to actually work with people productively and positively. The trouble is telling our students to go home and practice having hard conversations out in the wild is kind of dubious for many reasons, and we ethically can't really do that. So until now, it's been really tough to actually get our students to deliberately practice this skill, which I think is absolutely essential. But I think large language models actually afford us this practice a little bit. So you see my prompt here, I'll read out just a little bit. AI assist me in practicing effective communication and discussion of judgment and decision-making concepts with individuals who might hold counterfactual beliefs. In this simulation, you'll play the role of either a layperson or a conspiracy theorist, while I take on the role of a student with a good grasp on the subject. The simulation will be structured as an ongoing conversation consisting of multiple exchanges, and will follow these steps. And down towards the bottom, after the 6th exchange, I want you to give me some feedback on how I went relative to best practices in communication and persuasion. And then based on my overall performance, I want you to give me a new scenario. If I haven't done so well before, make it a little easier. If I did do quite well, let's make it a bit harder with a new topic entirely. Now, I'm not sure if we've already posted the link to the actual chat in the chat. If not, I can do that immediately after. But the punchline of the story is that GPT does a phenomenal job. And when you think about it, the prompt that I've actually given this it's kind of vague. So I haven't said anything about which topics I want you to talk about. I haven't said anything about the character's persona that I want you to take on, or even the style really of feedback that I want you to give me. And intuitively, GPT has actually done a beautiful job of aligning itself with the very principles that are in the course that we teach. So what I would say with this, I mean, we've seen a lot of kind of things in the media and, you know, at the university level as well, fears about how, you know, GPT is going to replace the teacher. It's going to replace the therapist. It's going to replace the lawyer. But we haven't really seen it talked about much, flipping that kind of on its head, where, well, we can still act as, say, the teacher, but we use GPT to act as our student so that we get the chance to iteratively practice our ability at communicating, our ability at cross-examining, or our ability at practicing therapy with a patient where GPT is the patient, and we can prompt the large language model to take on any kind of persona that we like. So the way that I see this kind of unfolding in my class can go kind of either in the formative or summative assessment direction, but it's basically, for me, a really powerful learning tool. Before we start talking about how I will assess this or anything else, it's an opportunity to actually practice using the skills that we're kind of telling our students about, but without deliberately practicing having that conversation with your aunt at Christmas about horoscopes. You're actually never going to get better at having that conversation because you can't see where those difficult points are. GPT can, and it's done a beautiful job. So, and like I said, this seems like a model that can potentially generalize across a lot of domains. So I see my time is out. So any questions are quite welcome.
Amazing work, Ryan. Thank you. Open to questions and comments.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, Ryan. How do your tutors do with this, with difficult conversations with the students? Because you can get into pretty contentious territory pretty quickly. So I guess, how does this mirror the tutor interaction with students versus a computer interaction? Is this more freeing? Is it actually a better experience for students?
Well, I mean, look, in our class, it's a flipped class environment. So when we come to class, we're working in small groups. We've got 3 tutors in the room, 100 students in the room. So we're floating around. And the nature of the class is to always be in discussion and activities. However, those discussions and activities, we're not ever doing a role play or a simulation of this kind. We're talking around the concepts and using them and instantiating them in different ways. But we're not able to have a conversation like this because, I mean, technically, like, even if you were to try and do this, I'll play this role, you play that role, because you're pretending, or because your partner is pretending, I don't think you get as close as it does I mean, I really encourage you to read the conversation. When I was practicing this, I felt that genuine sense of like, oh, like, why don't you get this? And in that moment, it's like, yeah, this is exactly the feeling that we encounter when we're talking to someone, which I don't really think you get quite so well when you're in that pretend scenario with your friend at the table. So look, I don't know. This is not something that we've actually tried to do in class before, because I just don't think that it would work so well. But I think that this actually, maybe ironically, is more high fidelity.
Thanks for that. A quick follow-up from me. You know, that might be more general than what you've done here. Great work here. I haven't found the way of formally bringing in sort of ChatGPT or generative AI into my course, mostly because, well, it's not UQ supported. You can't enforce students to create an account. And chances are that there will no longer be a free model, you know, say in a few months. So it'd be quite, so then you have to make sort of further changes down ahead. If there's no way to actually formally bring it in, you know, how can we design activities like this in a meaningful way? Is there an educational version of this that could be used or will have licenses for? I'm not sure.
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I mean, so far what I've been seeing around is that probably there's always going to be a version of this that is free. Now, obviously 3.5 is the free version and 4 is the paid version. But once 5 comes out, what I've been seeing is that 4 will probably become the free version. So I'm less kind of concerned about that. I mean, something that I've been working on with Jason Tangen is we've actually been designing our own chatbots. So doing all the back-end work and creating our own interface as well. And this is something that we could absolutely easily kind of integrate into those mini chatbots as well, which are basically just GPT, but specialized for being a conspiracy theorist, which, you know, in our course, we could just simply provide the link to, and everyone would have access to that. Making that scalable is the problem at the moment, because that comes with a cost. The API costs of running those things is tricky. So we're working in that space a little bit to try and do that. But at least at the moment, I have not a huge amount of fear about this becoming kind of inaccessible. And I mean, even the way that like I see this kind of running would be even during class time, like jump on a computer and have the 5-minute conversation, and then let's show each other, how did you go with your chat? Haha, this is what happened with mine.
Dom, do you want to ask a question?
Sure, thank you. So my question was, Ryan, I feel like when I'm chatting to a chatbot, and I've seen some hints of it, that I chat in a different way to what I do with humans. So some examples of that is most people, I think there's a couple of examples where people got in, their first things to try and push the chatbot and see it do weird things and explore the edges, which I don't normally do with people. I do sometimes, but it's not my normal way of operating. Do you see or imagine people interacting differently with the chatbot than what they would with a human? And I see benefit. I think they will, but I also think there's benefits as well as disadvantages to that. I know you've gone further down this road than I have.
Well, look, to be honest, I hope that they do. I hope that they do interact differently in this particular use case than they would on, say, Facebook in the comment thread, right? And that's kind of the point, because the way that a lot of people, when they're interacting with people in this, you know, belief-based space, I go on Facebook, I see that you've made this outrageous claim about something, and I say, that's ridiculous, like none of the evidence supports that, which is a response that is totally useless, actually, in that space where we're trying to change things. So like, I hope that they do, and I hope that it's practice. And this is the thing, the way that I imagine this kind of use being actually implemented is not as a one-off, but as like a weekly thing, like a weekly task where we have to keep doing it, because as we all know, that the only way of actually getting better is with repeated practice. So like, yeah, I kind of hope that they do interact differently with it. But again, especially if it's forming a kind of summative assessment piece where it's, you know, 1 or 2% thing, they're supposed to be demonstrating, hey, I've remembered the important stuff about framing, and I've remembered that, oh, well, when people are relying on this particular heuristic, that we've got to take this kind of approach. So
All right, thank you for that response. Any final questions before we move on? Okay, thanks again, Ryan.
thank you.
Liz and Kirsty, over to you.
Thank you so much. So really, really interesting to hear from Jack and Ryan, even we're from quite different disciplines, but certainly some of the points that you both made in terms of the ability to shape assessment and sort of reframe, refocus, adjust weightings. Some of those generic themes are certainly some of the things that we're going to discuss in our area as well. So in terms of a bit of a background, Kirsty and I are involved in this first year course, which in semester 1, 2023 has approximately 600 students and is entirely open book and unvigilated assessment. So we were coming into semester 1, 2023 pretty terrified, I guess, is my general theme, because I'd started it. I'd started with the course and UQ in semester 2, 2022, and we'd seen quite a skewed distribution into the 6s and particularly 7s. So we were already on a journey to try and make the course more appropriate and more challenging. But at the same time, we had AI land in our lap as well. So timing wise, although I was terrified, I think it's worked really well. We kept the same assessment structure, being a multiple choice quiz, an Inspera assignment and a final exam. But we did introduce a new learning objective, which was to introduce decision making in an accounting and business context. And that really helped because we could bring in all these more challenging aspects based on that learning objective. And that was particularly relevant for the Inspera assignment and the final exam. In terms of the multiple choice quiz, I did put the questions through that and through ChatGPT. And look, it's a no-brainer. This is accounting, this is accounting for non-accountants and basic accounting. Firstly, the first 3 topics, ChatGPT could do almost all of it. There was one question in particular that it did actually calculate incorrectly because it was using American terminology rather than Australian terminology. So I was able to say to the students, actually, we've tried ChatGPT and it doesn't get all the questions correct, which was a bit of an extension because there was really only one that it didn't do properly. But the interesting thing I think I have observed is some students just genuinely do want to learn, so just relying on AI isn't meeting their longer term goals in terms of actually understanding the content. But in particular with what we did with Inspera, we went back to the drawing board with a blank page and Kirsty created a new assessment scenario and we spent a lot of time across the university to understand all the different Inspera question types and particularly the ones that could be auto-marked, because in a course like ours, the ability to auto-mark would be really helpful where we could to create both more challenging questions, but something that doesn't need so much marking. So we designed 2 manually marked questions worth 25% of the 30% Inspera assessment, considering AI in mind. So there's quite a large stimulus that is sort of part of that and sort of builds into that scenario. So the students had to look at what was in the stimulus, use their accounting knowledge, interrogate data, and then answer those short answer questions with the knowledge learned and with appropriate justification. So in terms of what we learned, the assignment watch continued to be useful. We trialled that in semester 2, 2022, and it was helpful there. It was helpful again this semester as well. So I would highly recommend assignment watch. In terms of some of the things that we did notice this time with the Inspera assignment, one of the benefits of using Inspera is you do get that granular idea of how many students have accessed the assessment. I mean, often we know students leave it to the last minute, but the actual reality of how late they leave it was quite frightening. So yeah, 3 days out, 40% of students hadn't accessed the task at all, and we were sending repeated reminders, and we could see those gradual, in the dying sort of in the last 24 hours, almost all of them had now jumped in, but that there were many that didn't take that on quickly, I guess. We did see students appearing to have used AI or Google because there were a significant number of what would appear to be completely irrelevant responses. So they didn't relate to our stimulus, didn't relate to the question that we were asking. And certainly we saw a lot of students making completely inappropriate decisions based on the stimulus and what we were asking. In terms of the student experience, especially in our CCAT, we got really good comments around the design of the course, the type of tasks, and the, you know, the all of the assessment. Actually, most were quite positive comments around the assessment, and that, you know, that all of the assessments were enable them to demonstrate their knowledge and enjoy that new knowledge. And really happy to share that we did achieve a normal course distribution in semester 1 with around 8% 7s, 17% 6s, and then a little bit of a spread from there. But that was coming out of semester 2, where we had very, very high number of 6s and 7s. So despite having, you know, despite all my night terrors around AI and an uninvigilated open book assessment, by reconsidering and redesigning that assessment and putting some serious thought into all aspects of the assessment, including the final exam, we were able to get that nice distribution. In terms of what we do differently, I think we are on a journey of shaping our assessment. So a lot of this will just continue to sort of, you know, explore what we can do. So continuing to look at our Inspira stimulus to make sure it's logical and to sort of line it up nicely with authentic business accounting information. Continue to explore all the alternative question types available in Inspira. And I must say the Inspira team have been amazing to really help us understand how we could use some of those really quite amazing question types. I think a challenge for us with Inspira is we're using Inspira for an assignment rather than an exam. And I think in a lot of the university, it's designed for exams. So we hit a few roadblocks in terms of effective marking. So to try and find some other collaboration with other staff using Inspira with assignments might be helpful for us to rethink our marking approach. To reinforce to students that engaging with lecture and tutorial content consistently helps in all assessment. So particularly because we could see students were accessing the Inspira task so late, and many of them just hadn't accessed lecture or tutorial material either at that point. Some of those very, very late assessments were quite poor. We've also identified that we will reduce the allocated time for our multiple choice quiz in semester 2 2023. So that will also help, that there'll be same number of questions, but 60 minutes rather than the additional 10 reading time and 15 minutes submission time, as is a Blackboard test. So it's going to be auto submitted. So we can cut that extra 25 minutes off, which is great. And in terms of the final exam, we had spoken to some of the learning designers around some of the aspects we could use for our final exam in terms of a useful adaptation of accounting type content in a final exam context that is open book. Even though it was all open book, we were able to make sure the students with the knowledge and under those time limits could achieve well, but students that didn't actually understand the knowledge, ChatGPT wasn't helping them answer our final exam questions, which is great. So that's a bit of a summary of all the things that we've achieved in semester 1 2023.
Thank you so much. Open to questions and comments. Great work. I'll start things off while we're waiting for others. In terms of what you mentioned, roughly 1/3 of students appear to have used it. Had the assessment asked students to formally mention if they have used AI in their responses?
So because we are such an introductory course, in our ECP, we actually said generative AI was not to be used. And that was sort of the suggested fallback plan. But we deep down knew that was unlikely to actually be the reality. But I guess to present that up front. But the types of responses, you know, some of the ones we could see, you know, they didn't even address the question at all, and they were just completely irrelevant. So I can see Tanya's asked a question: was the correlation between the students who accessed the assessment task late and assessment responses that did not relate to the assessment indicating possible AI use? Yes, in some cases we could, because the other advantage, there's so many advantages of Inspera, but one of the advantages of Inspera, you can see how many minutes they've spent in the Inspera. So we could see some of the poorly performing students had accessed the assessment within the last, say, 24 hours. And yes, the quality of some of their responses, particularly in those two big manually marked questions, was quite poor. So, you know, they've left everything to the last minute, can't dedicate time to actually authentic decision making. So let's throw it to AI and see what it does. And generally it actually did quite a poor job.
I wondered, Liz, whether you had any thoughts about why they were leaving it so late.
Look, I think this is first semester students in an undergrad environment, and it's been I mean, I've taught undergrad before, but it's been a while since I realised what life is like in the undergrad. And you know, when we're a core, we're not their, you know, we're not their elective, or you know, they sort of have to do it. So even students that were sort of vaguely interested, you know, they, you know, it's not we're not accounting for accountants, you know, that's sort of a slightly different thing again. So I think in terms of our priority in their life and their study, we're probably pretty low ranking there. So and I think that perception that actually it's probably pretty easy, you know, this is not rocket science, but surprisingly, if they don't engage with that content, they're not coming to lectures, not coming to tutorials, not reading the text, they actually couldn't do the assessment effectively either. So certainly we've learnt some things that we'll be sharing with students in SEM 2 around, you know, study techniques, better way to approach assessment, and to understand that they do genuinely need to put some effort in, and they do generally need to actually understand something themselves rather than just rely on Google or AI.
Thank you. The comment from Kirsty there.
Yeah, that was actually something that we did discover, sort of probably links into some of Jack and Ryan's comments too, that I think students are still learning how to use AI as well. So we may on our journey see that students start to be able, you know, to be able to use it more effectively, particularly for our multiple choice quiz. But I'm sort of glad we've reduced the timing with that. But certainly AI at the moment, even some of the mathematical aspects of our final exam, AI struggles with some of the tables and things we had for budgets and things. So it wasn't able to answer it quick, you know, to answer it efficiently or effectively.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Really interesting discussion there. Wang, I'll pass it over to you if you're here.
Hi everyone, my name is Hong and I am one of the e-learning advisors here at Italy. So in April, Turnitin released its generative AI writing detection functionalities, and UQ decided to turn the function on so that we can test the tool further, and also it assists our course coordinator who wanted to see if their student use AI without acknowledgement, or if AI is not allowed in their course, but the student use AI in their assignment. So after 2 months of implementation, we have been sending back our feedback about the tool. And recently, Turnitin is presenting a workshop about how to use the tool. And they mentioned some of the improvement in this tool. So coming developments in the tool, including first, the AI statistic or the indicators. So currently, course staff, if they click on the submission, they won't be able to see the AI indicator in the student submission, but not the aggregated score yet, similar to the similarity report, but that column will be added in the near future. And secondly, at the moment, staff can download the similarity report, but not the AI report yet. So that one is also in the development. And for the references validation, we have known that ChatGPT currently not being able to create or comes up with the correct references, and it entail to time-consuming checking process for the staff, but then Turnitin is developing the capability to check references and provide instructors with actionable data. So it will reduce the burden of manually checked each reference. And the last development will be in Authenticate. The generative AI detection will be available in Authenticate at the end of 2023. Yep. So that is some of the update about the tool. Thank you.
Is there a second slide?
Yep. So we have been providing the Turnitin update workshops, but if you want to request a custom workshop on the tool for your school or for your group of tutors, we are happy to provide the custom workshop. So you only need to contact us, and then we will arrange a suitable time.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Hassan.
Thank you. All right, well, that would bring us to the end of our session. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Don, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I wanted to say thank you. I have a question. Do I have a moment to ask a question, if I can take 3 minutes?
Go ahead.
So one of the themes that seem to be coming through is the diversity of ways that students are engaging with these. And we have growing cases of students who seem to have very primitive use of generative AI. And on the other side, we have some, I think, potentially much smaller groups of students doing amazing things and really pushing. I think, Jack, you hinted at that ability. They put a lot of prompts together in some really interesting cases. They could do some really great things with their lab reports. So one of the challenges that I have is my dream would be that all our students hit a point where they leave the university and have some fairly sophisticated use, which I think would be good, but also challenging. How can we help students to get there? How do we help them to learn how to use these things well as ethically, while we're, I think, in many ways struggling alongside them and occasionally running to try and keep up? And really interested to know if any of you had recommendations, or also anyone else here today. Jack, can I start with you? And then I'll go to Ryan.
You want to answer to solve the world?
Yes, solve my problems, Jack.
Problems.
Yes.
I think it comes down to communication, isn't it? I mean, the prompting is just a form of dialogue. I mean, you're talking to an amorphous language model, but it comes down to the same thing. If you were to ask a tutor to help you do your whole assignment for you, that's a very surface level query, and you're unlikely to get a very sophisticated response. If you're then honing on a very specific part of the task and you know the right questions to ask, you're not filled with unknown unknowns, you're filled with known unknowns, then that line of questioning is going to be much more specific. So I think it comes down to Socratic dialogue, and it comes down to having interactions with students, whether it be face-to-face or online, and a commitment to more interactive forms of discussion as opposed to the transmission type assessment models. That has to at least be the starting point in my mind.
Thanks.
Yeah, on off the back of that, I mean, I think it's our responsibility to actually create learning activities and assessments that necessitate use, and that we instantiate its practice. So like actually designing activities that require use and grade their capacity on their actual prompting itself, not on the actual output of what the assignment used to look like, but the quality of the prompting. And I think we can get really creative actually about the kinds of tasks that we set for the specific purpose of actually improving at prompting. Jack's totally right. Like that there's an iterative process that you have to use, and again, it's a matter of perspective taking, because like you said, if you ask your assistant to go and do something for you, you know you have to explain particular things. And I guess it's helping our students take that perspective of the fact that you're talking to someone who doesn't know everything in your mind is half the battle. But yeah, unless we actually design learning activities where the goal is to actually learn the skill, then it won't happen, of course.
Thank you.
I add what I've done in my class, if that's okay. So we, one of my assignments had it that students are able to use it if they want, not forced, but possible to use. And then after the assignment deadline, I actually did some exemplars in class, how taking it in and actually showing them, what were some of the forms that you could actually communicate and have prompts that will lead you to the right response, and how you can have follow-up questions that would help. There's also discussions around creating a course about AI for all that will be more generally about AI, but would also have aspects of generative AI as well. So I think, that would be one way to go. And Luke has also mentioned something similar in the chat. I do worry, though, if we focus too much on prompting in particular, chances are prompting in a year from now or two will be very different. So the long-term benefits of focusing too much on, particular aspects of what that would look like, I do wonder if we'll have, dividend returns in the long term. Luke, you've got your hand up.
I think that you make a really good point about that, and that focusing too much on the prompting now is definitely going to be short-sighted. But I also can see that being enormous value in talking about the prompt in the moments, and saying this is what a Socratic dialogue is, and this is how it works, and this becomes the vector for developing this specific kind of skill as a new way of going about it. So the course may not, if we were going to create an individual course, it might only be something that lives for a year before we kill it off because it's no longer viable in those same activities.
Yeah.
Might be better off as a short form credential, Hassan. A course that's killed off after a year doesn't really work with us, right?
Noted. All right. Any final thoughts or comments from anyone before we wrap it up, just so that everybody has sufficient time to get their 2 p.m. meetings, if there's any?
Just before everybody goes, if there's a link in the chat, if you want to provide some feedback now, and if anything has sparked an interest in you, we are running another What's Working on the 21st of August, and we're always keen to invite people along. So if you'd like to contact Yvette or myself and to speak, if you would like to have a presentation space, then we would welcome you, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Jack, Ryan, and Liz for sharing today, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Hassan. Thank you, everyone.